What's going on, everybody? Grillfather Johnny L here, and today I'm going to smoke you a beef tri-tip that you can't refuse, and one of my friends back here is going to help us out. But I shouldn't say that too loud, they might run away. I'll meet you back at Texas North.
We are live from my backyard where I am smoking these meat like a brisket. I'm making meat now. Someone asked me, do I smoke meat? That's gonna be delicious. Yeah, if I smoke meat, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Hey, before we go inside, I just want to give you a little bit of background information about the beef tri-tip. And on average, it will weigh anywhere between 1.5 and 4 pounds. I believe ours is right around 3 pounds today. And it comes from the sirloin subprimal section of the cow. I'll give you a little bit more of a detailed view of that once we go inside. The cut is triangular in shape, hence the name tri-tip. And in terms of its history, Bob Schultz back in the 1950s is credited with developing this cut when he owned the Santa Maria market in the Santa Maria Valley region of California. Now, it's widely known, as I said, as the tri-tip, but other names for it include the California cut, the Santa Maria steak, as well as the Newport steak. As I mentioned outside, the tri-tip comes from the sirloin subprimal, and it is right here in this region of the cow. You can see this is where the sirloin section is, between the short loin and the round. So what I'm going to do right now is, before I get to the actual prep, this particular tri-tip came from Wild Fork Foods. It's one of my sources where I get my meats from. It's a prime graded tri-tip, 2.99 pounds, so about 3 pounds. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open this up and pat dry it, and then we'll get into the actual preparation. All right, so I have the meat out of its packaging and pat dried, and time to trim it up a little bit. And I always like to make sure my knives are super sharp when I go to do any kind of cutting or slicing. So I'll give this a couple of swipes here on my miniature sharpener, and we'll get some of this surface fat off. A little bit of silver skin. And really, what trimming comes down to a personal preference. You don't have to trim. Some people just leave a significant amount of fat on. I like to tidy it up just a little bit and take. I don't want to dig into the meat, so I just take off some of this fat that's on the surface. It's got some nice marbling here. Again, this is a prime grade. I'll take some of this off right here. Always want to make sure that you cut with the grain on trimming. And see how we're looking on this side. This side, we'll take this off right here. It's a little unsightly, and you can use both hands when it comes to trimming, and help just pull some of that fat right off. Sometimes the silver skin gets a little tricky to pull out, but angles sometimes really kind of helps with removing fat, giving you a little bit of leverage. We'll take this off here as well. And if you can get on the silver skin, sometimes get underneath it a little bit and pull and trim at the same time. a lot of times it works out pretty nicely. The key is I don't like to sacrifice too much of the meat when I'm trimming. So I'll leave, yeah, that's kind of inside there, intramuscular fat there. I'll leave that alone. And yeah, a little bit of silver skin on the surface on this side too. So I'll try taking that off. Can be a little tricky. And one way to do it, which is what I do with my briskets, and I didn't do it this time with the tri-tip here, is that you can put the meat in the freezer for about 20 minutes and let it get a little bit hardened up. And what that will do is it'll allow for easier trimming of the fat, because when the fat gets warm, then it's a little bit more difficult to trim, and so it's better to trim when it's hardened or slightly hardened. You don't want to freeze it while you're in there. So if you do about 20 minutes or so in there, that'll be enough to make it really nice and cold, and it'll just really kind of help with making your trimming go a lot easier. So again, I'm going to leave some of this on here. It's not a big deal. It won't hurt in the actual cook. So that's what we're looking at right now. Now, the next step after the trim in the preparation process is to add a binder so that your rub or your seasoning can stick to it. My binder of choice is duck fat. I'll put a link in the description below. You can use whatever binder you want, olive oil or mustard. A lot of people use. My personal preference is the duck fat. It's a little bit of a healthier choice for an oil. So we give that a nice coating on there. Now, in terms of the rub that I use, when it comes to beef, I go pretty simple, and I don't use my all-purpose rub. And I don't use salt. And I know that is maybe a little bit of a taboo, but yeah, the American diet has enough salt in it as it is. And I've never, in all the years of cooking, I've never had anyone say, "Hey, pass me the salt. This needs salt." What I do is I use a combination of no salt. So I'll put an application of that on, as well as accent. And the two together, I find, make up for the salt that I don't put in there. So for the no salt, I will put a generous application on all sides of the meat, front, back, and the sides as well. I'm pretty generous on this versus the no salt, or the accent, which I just put a little dusting on. Don't put too much on that. And then I'll just pat that in a little bit. Make sure I hit the sides as well. And again, these two will kind of make up the 1-2 punch for the fact that I don't use salt. So just a light dusting of that. And then finally, I will follow up with the 16 mesh coarse ground pepper. I'll put a link in the description below as well. I get mine at a company out of Georgia, and I will put that link in the description as well down there in case you're interested in using the same source that I use for the coarse ground 16 mesh coarse ground black pepper. This will also help with the bark formation during the course of the smoke. And one final bonus ingredient that I like to use with beef is rosemary. So I'm just going to give a little touch of rosemary just to add a little bit to the flavor profile. And I'm just going to do it on the surface. I'm not going to worry too much about the side. Don't want to put too much on and overpower the flavor profile. So there you have it. That's the binder and the rub. And the next step, what I do is I take a cooling rack and I cook my meats in the smoker on a cooling rack sprayed up with Pam. And I will put this on the cooling rack overnight. I like the cooling rack because it's easy to transport to the smoker and off as well. It's always a nice clean surface, so I'm not too worried about the grates on the smoker. And what I'll do now is just let this sit overnight in the refrigerator uncovered, and then tomorrow we will pick back up and get this on the smoker. All right, our tri-tip is out of the refrigerator after a long night of rest, and it's ready to go. But I want to talk about right now is the game plan for today and what I use to help keep me on track with the whole cook is I have a log book. And what I do is I have a sheet for each time I do a cook. And I'll go over this sheet here in a minute. And what this does is it just helps me to stay on track and so that I don't forget about doing certain steps, or it's time to spritz again, or it's time to do this or that. And it also gives me a nice chronology that I slip away in the logbook for later. So when I go ahead and do the cook again for tri-tip, that I can refer back to what I did on this particular day, what kind of wood I used, and what were the temperatures like outside, what went right, what could have gone better, things like that. So let's take another closer look at what our game plan is for today. So here's a closer look at the log game plan sheet for today. And you can see that we are using the Pit Boss smoker. And we have one tri-tip that's about 3 pounds going on. We have the meat coming frozen from Wild Fork Foods. The rub that we used is the no salt / accent and pepper. And the binder is duck fat. We're using post oak wood. We're going to sear it first. And what we're looking at today in terms of cooking temperatures, we want to smoke it at 225 degrees, and we're looking for an internal temperature of 135. And the sheet goes on to cover other areas like when we spritz, and if you change chips, if we're using chips, and then what our rest time is, what the weather is like outside. And again, this all will help me just keep things on track, and will also help when I go to cook tri-tip again. I can refer back to this sheet and see what I did and refresh my memory. Now, before we head outside, I just want to cover what I call the 4 T's for successful barbecuing. And they are taste, tenderness, texture, and the fourth and most important T, I believe, is technique. Now, you may say, well, what about the T of temperature? Temperature is important, but I think that it belongs up under the T of technique. And if we don't get the technique right, then taste and tenderness and texture, one or all 3 of them, might be impacted by the fact that we didn't do something right in the technique. So what we're going to do today is a two-step cooking process. We're going to sear the tri-tip, and then 2, we're going to smoke it. So sear first and then smoke second. The wood we're using, post oak, it's going to give us a slightly spicy, smoky flavor on the final product. And so I got the searing station set up. I have the smoker set up. So boogity, 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 let's go smoking, friends. So the searing station is set up and ready to go, and you can see that I have the searing station set up right next to the smoker, and once we're done searing, we're going to transfer the tri-tip right into the smoker. So I have a 600 degree or so cast iron skillet ready to go, a lodge. I'm just going to put down some canola cooking oil and give it a good coating, and then we'll put the tri-tip right on top, and we'll let that sear for a couple of minutes. And I'm going to use a bacon press to make sure that I get it nice, keep a nice even surface to the cast iron skillet, so that I get a nice even coating of browning going on with the tri-tip. We'll check back here in a couple of minutes.
2 minutes later.
All right, it's been a couple of minutes. Let's see how the sear's going. You'll notice that I used the bacon press to help keep it flat to the surface. I put aluminum foil on it just to make it a little bit easier to clean. Let's check how things are looking. It looks great, has a nice brown, even sear across the surface. So we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side, and I'll hit the sides as well. All right, the tri-tip is nice and seared on all sides. While we were away, I did the long side, the two long sides, and the short side. Basically, you just kind of have to hold it up with the tongs. So it got a nice crust going on across the surface on all sides. So all we're ready to do now is transfer this to the cooking rack. And I'm going to put this end this way. And then all that's left is to move this into the smoker and let the smoker do its thing. And we will periodically check back and see how things are going.
1 hour later.
All right, friends, so we're an hour into this cook. We're at 122 degrees internal. We're looking to get up to 135. We're cooking at 225 on the pit boss, and I'm going to add some moisture, some apple cider vinegar. So we'll check back here in a little bit. All right, friends, my probe is telling me that we're at the finish line here. Let's give this one more check and see exactly where we're at. And 136, so good to go. I'm going to give this one more spritz. And I just wanted to make a comment about the searing. I do the searing up front so I can control my crust and then let the smoker deal with the temperatures on the back end versus the reverse searing. So I'm just a big fan of doing the searing up front. And so what we're going to do now, we're going to take this off. We're going to wrap it in some heavy duty aluminum foil, and we'll let this rest for 30 minutes. See you in a bit. All right, the meat has rested for 30 minutes, so it's time to go ahead and get carving. I'm going to give my carving knife here a few swipes on my miniature sharpener, so that I make sure that I have the sharpest knife possible for cutting up the tri-tip. And as far as slicing goes, tri-tip is a little tricky because the grain, it goes in two different directions. And remember, you always want to slice against the grain. And you can see here a little bit that the grain's going this way in this portion, and then it's going this way over here. So we are going to cut against the grain. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a cut called the cutting on the double bias. So cutting on the bias means cutting at an angle, like at a 45-degree angle. And what cutting on the bias will do is make the slices of meat even more tender and taste even a little bit better. So, but that's on the bias, and it's even going to be more so when you cut on the double bias. So the bias is right here, and then a little bit of an angle to it will make it a double bias. So let's go ahead and we'll cut this end piece off. Keep in mind now, it's got nice bark on it, and you know, the bark develops when you smoke it. Now, I was after a nice crust at the beginning because essentially this is one big piece of steak. So when I'm searing it, the result is a crust. But then when I put it on the smoker, the result is the crust essentially becomes bark. So let's just continue on slicing here, and we're getting close to the point where I'm going to change directions here pretty soon. So there we have it that way, and the juices distributed back in pretty well. I let it go a little extra long, so I didn't want the juices to come flying out all over the place. So now I'm going to turn this, and I'm going to cut this way. Again, on the double bias against the grain. And if you cut it in thin slices, the thinner you cut it, the more tender it's going to be. You can cut thicker slices if you choose. But and I'll tell you, this is probably my favorite cut of meat to smoke. This only took about 2 hours on the smoker, and it just tastes amazing. If you haven't done tri-tip before, you have to try it because it's a quick smoke, a quick cook, and it really tastes amazing. So I'm going to put this piece off to the side, and so here you have it. Sliced against the grain this way, and then this way when the grain was going along the lines this way. So what you see, I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out, medium rare, and you can see from the juices on the cutting board that it's very moist, and I suspect if I pull this, you know, it's going to pull apart without even having to use a knife. The tri-tip is ready to eat, so I'm going to go ring the dinner bell and let the gang know that it's time for dinner. If you're a first-time viewer to my channel, I want to let you know that I don't do taste tests on camera, and the reason is because I can't offer you a bite to eat, so I'm not going to eat in front of you. But I believe that if you follow the technique outlined in today's video, that you will be happy with the taste, the tenderness, and the texture of your tri-tip. And when you go to do your own taste test, you're going to say, this is forget about it good, forget about it good. Now, I'm really happy with the way that this tri-tip turned out. Again, I'm not going to do a taste test, but I am going to give this the Grill Father Johnny L stamp of approval. Hey everybody, thanks for stopping by the channel today. Hope you found this video useful and helpful. Just do me a favor, hitting the like and subscribe buttons, as well as sharing this video with a family member or friend. Till next time, this is Grill Father Johnny L. Take care, God bless, and smoke on.